Alrighty, today we're taking a look at strategies for argument as used by ancient logic experts, as used by Hamilton, and on we go. Or rather, Lin-Manuel Miranda. The Greeks, I believe, said that there are three basic modes of persuading people: ethos, pathos, and logos. Aristotle specifically, and the art of rhetoric. What is rhetoric? Rhetoric is how to influence people, how to change their minds, how to persuade your audience, whether aloud or written, that you're right about stuff. And the Greeks and Romans taught this as a skill. A proper gentleman in Rome was expected to be able to stand up and defend his ideas in public using this art form. Nowadays, we see these more in presidential speech writers, in marketing, in a few specific professions that really need to use these strategies, but we do see a lot of them in advertising. All righty. Basically, ethos is this is the ethical thing to do, and or the speaker is such a great guy, is, George Washington would agree with this speech, things like that, that make us think that there is some credibility here. Pathos is emotion. Look at my sad, big-eyed children who have tears falling from their eyes. Whenever anyone says, think of the children, we're doing pathos. And logos, persuasion based on logic, reason, statistics, facts, numbers. Yeah. Which is the best one to use? Generally, people agree it's a combination of all of them, depending who your audience is, who you're trying to talk to about what. So here we are with the basic summary. Ethos, appeal to the authority or the person's credibility. Pathos, appeal to emotion. And logos, appeal to reason and facts. Yes, obviously, this is where we get our word ethics. Does our speaker sound like they know what they're talking about? Do they believe themselves? Are they an expert? We have that bit in American court system where the lawyer tries to gain the trust of the jury. It doesn't matter whether his client did it or not, or even whether it looks like the client did it or not. It matters whether the jury like the lawyer and obviously like the client, or if there are reasons they dislike the lawyer or the client, which could be anything from sloppy clothing to coughing a lot to more serious issues. If the audience seems uninterested, unenthusiastic, uh, if the speaker, sorry, seems unenthusiastic, unprepared, inexperienced, we're not going to trust them, even if they're right. In America, lots of people trust the politician who's smooth and knows the right thing to say over the scientist who maybe didn't put on a tie or is confusing his listeners with too many scientific words and isn't really connecting with them. But if you're knowledgeable and confident and sound like you know what you're talking about, people like that a lot more. How does this work if we're talking about writing or reading, not speaking at all? Well, word choice, grammar, diction. If you're sending somebody a cover letter saying you'd like to be hired, do you have a proper heading on it? Do you have, are you polite? Are you using good sounding words, or are you just filling it all with a lot of blabber that doesn't go anywhere? Verbally, there's posture, body language, eye contact, what you're wearing. Are you wearing a military uniform and medals? Are you emphasizing that you used to be the mayor? Possibly neither of those will work for you, but at least standing up straight and making eye contact will. Pathos, pathetic, sympathy, empathy. Path means to feel emotions, have an emotional connection with the speaker. Make them feel happy, make them feel sad. Talk about your grandma, talk about how scared you were that time. Talk about how happy you were when you discovered this. Talk about the first ice cream you remember from your birthday. Talk about anything emotional that people can connect with. People like connecting with emotion, don't they? Make us feel sad about animals. Make us feel angry about the treatment of the environment. You've heard people say, make it personal. Don't just show us statistics, show us somebody we can care about. Show us a poster child for this. So many photos of sad children and animals have really made an impact on their audiences and on the world. Here they're pointing out the emotional words being used, like innocent animals and calamitous trend, meant to trigger emotions in the readers. Logos, word, reason, discourse, logic, logical. Anything that has to do with study of, sure. Here are some facts about how much of the rainforest we've lost. Here are some numbers. Here is how oxygen production works and why we need the rainforest. You can't argue with truth and facts. Facts make it clear that the speaker has something to provide. They're not just babbling here and not just generalizing. Lots of facts really tend to convince your readers or your listeners. Here we go with the numbers, the percentages, the names, the places, the dates. Sure. Yes. Historically, there was a moment when Julius Caesar was trying to crown himself Emperor of Rome, and the people were panicked because this was a republic. There isn't supposed to be a ruler. So a bunch of the Senate decided to kill him, and on the Ides of March, when he walked into the Senate, they stabbed him, what was it, 52 times, something like that, and killed him, even though he was their friend, their colleague, their buddy, gave them lots of gifts, etc. Okay. Well, as I said, in Rome, you're supposed to be able to stand up in public and defend yourself using all these rhetorical terms I've been showing you. So, in fact, that is what the conspirators did. And they, in fact, had the people pretty much convinced that, yeah, it's sad that they had to kill Caesar, but it was for the good of Rome and it was the right thing to do. And then they turned to Mark Antony, who was just a nice guy, people pleaser. Everyone liked him, but he'd never really, had much impact on the society. And he came up to say a few words. And for reasons that are not known to history, Mark Antony, right then and there, decided to become ambitious. And he gave a speech. This is Caesar's version of the speech. We don't have the actual speech written down because he made it up on the spot using all of these techniques we've been discussing. And in the speech, he was there. He started out with, I come to bury Caesar not to praise him, but in fact slips in an awful lot of praise about how wonderful Caesar was, what a majestic man he was, how he gave the people of Rome so many gifts, including all of his gardens and free food and stuff like that he was leaving to the people and offered to the people while he was alive. And these people, his friends, said that they were honorable, but they killed him. And by the time Mark Antony was done, the crowd rose up and killed all the conspirators by nightfall. So, yes, the power of language and speaking. Caesar was my friend and faithful. I presented him a kingly crown, and he refused it. Was this ambition? Trust me, I knew Caesar personally. Trust me, I was the one to offer him a crown. Trust me. Do I look like I'm lying about Caesar being ambitious? Let's be logical here. Well, I said logical, but yes. Um, I am the person of authority here. Secretly, I slipped in that I was so powerful I got to offer Caesar a crown. I'm like a kingmaker, and we were close buddies. I'm an expert here. Alrighty then. During the next 5 years, I started a company called Next, another company called Pixar, fell in love with an amazing woman who would become my wife. Well, why did he slip that in there? Because personal is interesting. Again, emotions. Yeah, sure. And also ethos here. Why should we care about me? Because I founded a little company called Pixar you might have heard of. In fact, Toy Story made the world's first computer animated feature film. Ooh, isn't that fancy? Now we respect the guy. And is the most successful animation studio in the world. Ooh, don't we respect the guy? So he starts out with some personal emotion, but quickly gets into, you respect me for all this stuff, don't you? From the Iliad. Pity the rest of the Achaeans, the Greeks, basically, who are being harassed. They will honor you as a god, and you will earn great glory at their hands. You might even kill Hector, for he is infatuated, and he says that not a Greek, there were lots of words for the Greek, no Greek can stand against him. Ooh, Hector hates your guts. You should attack him. And ooh, the Greeks are being harassed and persecuted. You should feel bad for them. Sure. Achilles, please join the war again. You should feel bad for the Greeks. You should feel angry at Hector. You should feel hopeful for great glory that you're going to get. These are all emotional things that should push you to change your mind. Alrighty. Likewise, here's Martin Luther King Jr. many, many centuries later, emphasizing you've come from narrow jail cells, but your quest for freedom left you battered by the storms of persecution and staggered by the winds of police brutality. Persecution is pretty abstract. It's hard to picture. But if we say the storms of persecution, you can really feel it in your body, and it becomes much more concrete. And he's got the emotions here with, you guys have suffered terrible things, and that's awful. But also, we've been through this horrible experience and we have to make it better. And anyone listening who hasn't gone through this needs to feel bad for us and step up and help things become better and be allies here. Logos. Sure. Darwin is explaining why he's sure that evolution is real, why this added to this, why this changed this. I don't really want to read Darwin aloud, but we get the idea. He uses logic, facts, I checked all the possibilities, things like that to persuade us. Likewise, let's get those numbers, those statistics, also comparisons. 500,000 Hiroshima-class atomic bombs is emotional and also logic, facts to persuade us. Thank you, Al Gore. Some other things that we could throw in here are mythos, Greek tragedy, appeal to myth, if we're, mentioning the Bible, mentioning Zeus, mentioning our American mythology, like the American Dream or George Washington, we're hitting all of these epic buttons. If we say, pick up your sword and come join me in this quest to make a lot of money in our business or something. I have a dream. American mythology. When our architects of our republic wrote the magnificent words of the Constitution and Declaration of Independence, the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence were great. They were the founding moment of our history. I am mentioning them because we're just so cool and that's our history. And I'm trying to nod to that. I'm trying to riff off of that. This was great, and now we're continuing this story to say, they said all men were created equal. Well, now we need to do that. They promised us something. We need it to happen. But mentions our American mythology and history, the big American symbols, and quotes it directly with life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness to bring that mythology into his stuff. It's like ethos, you trust me, I'm quoting American mythology, right? Kairos. Where and when the speech is happening? Well, I Have a Dream was given in front of the Lincoln Memorial. So he's not just mentioning our founding fathers, but Lincoln is visually standing right behind him. And there he is at the Capitol. Again, visual symbol that absolutely goes with the American mythology. Of course, we have so many speakers who are in front of flags or at shiny podiums or wearing royal regalia or all that kind of stuff, right? So, those are some different art forms one can bring to a speech. So here we are with our textbook, and once again, there's lots of strategies for argument. We're going to look at ethos, pathos, logos, but we've got plenty of others mixed in here, thanks to the Romans, and lots of examples from Hamilton, of course. Absurdity. When you're exaggerating your point so much that nobody's going to believe you, just to point out how ridiculous this all is. Hey, we're supposed to do what King Louis said, we had a treaty with him. Well, why don't we pull King Louis's head out of its basket and ask it how he feels about the French Revolution? Hey, what do you think we should do? Do what you want, I'm super dead. Okay, then. Emphasizing, he doesn't just say, our treaty is dead, there's no point now. He really pushes this to the point of, hey, let's haul King Louis's dead head out of a basket and ask it the question. All right, I am such a reader that no guarantee on my pronunciation here, sorry. Adinaton. Exaggerating so much, well, that this sounds impossible, or saying something that's really happening, but is so exaggerated that it sounds impossible, just to emphasize what a terrible circumstance we're in. Sir, we are eating our own horses. Things are that bad. No, we can't just soldier on and muscle through. Anachronosis, I guess. Now, granted, a lot of these are pretty obscure. I mean, they're not taught in English class today. These are really difficult, beyond English AP sort of things to logician level, but you might find them interesting. And even if you don't memorize all the terms and label them, well, you could still look them up if you're writing an essay, say, and still be able to label them. But even if you don't do that, you can recognize what's going on even without the fancy Latin word for it. So anyway, anachronosis. What do you guys think we should do next? And we see that from Hamilton and Jefferson, hey, audience, aren't I right here? Aren't I the best person to be making this choice here? Anthorism, a counter definition. Jefferson says the people are leading, and Washington corrects him. I don't think you're definition of what was going on here is quite correct. I think the people are not leading, the people are rioting. What happened yesterday was a mess. No, it was not a mess. It was, the apocalypse. It was, a natural disaster beyond anything we've ever seen. Don't just say it was a mess. So yeah, correcting somebody's definition of something. Apophasis. Apophysis. Yeah. Yeah. Pretending to deny something to suggest that they really are affirming it. I know you hate him, but let's hear what he has to say. Emphasizes that they should listen to Hamilton. Maybe this one they were listening to Burr? Yeah. Aporia. Asking a question to suggest that maybe this isn't right, maybe I don't trust this, maybe I don't believe this. If New York's in debt, why should Virginia bear it? Why should we listen to you? Why should we believe you? Why should we be doing this? An axiom. An axiom is a principle that we all know is true. All right, so let's say everything in the world is made out of atoms. All right, atoms are made out of smaller things. Okay, fine. But basically, if I said everything's made out of atoms, we could trust that. If I said the earth gets its warmth from the sun, we could trust that. And then I could build on my argument. But, I've started with something that we're all set on. Every action has its equal opposite reaction. Yeah, we can all accept that that's true. And then from there, we can move on to a more complicated question. Sure. Bathos. An emotional appeal that accidentally makes us laugh. Oops. King George is so sad that he's lost the colonies, but I'm afraid we are laughing at King George's emotional appeal. Sorry, King. Charisma. When you just have this magnetic energy that makes people want to listen to you and want to agree with you. My shot. Hamilton is out there speech making and his friends look at each other and go, wow, you need to be making your speeches in front of the public. Why? Because you're a really great speaker. And yes, Hamilton has this magnetic charm in the show, whereas other characters like Burr are showed being miserable because people just don't magically like them the same way. Claim. I'm saying this thing is true. Well, the cabinet battles, the farmer refuted, we have a lot of people claiming something is true, and then we go from there, right? Concession is when you acknowledge that the other side makes a fair point. You say our love is draining and you can't go on. I acknowledge that. But I'd like you to stick around anyway. Yeah. I know this proposal would cost a lot of money, but we should do it. Okay. Congery. Saying different things that all mean the same thing just to do emphasis. Your sentences border on senseless and you are paranoid in every paragraph. That's about the same thing twice. Okay then. Thank you, Eliza. Dishortatio. Giving people command on what to do. Imperative is a command. Stand there, sit down, don't leave. Talk less, smile more. Delivery, how you give your speech. Tone, gestures, attitude, eye contact, all of it. Hamilton is disgusted that Seabury is sitting there reading his paper in The Farmer Refuted, whereas Hamilton wants to passionately speak like he's in public. And as I said, his friends are very impressed by that. Okay. Demos, ordinary citizens, and who's making the decisions on their behalf. We see them liking Hamilton and then turning on him later, huh? Dialectic. Kind of like a dialogue, discussing the topic in order to have an agreement. We have rap battles in this in place of cabinet debates, but our characters do not actually agree on things, as opposed to in the room where it happened. Dialogue. Making a single point with several arguments. The rap battles. Hamilton and Jefferson have one point to make. We should join the French Revolution. We should not join the French Revolution. Things like that. And they use insults, guilt, duty, ethics, finances, logos, ethos, pathos, everything they can think of to back up this one point they're making. Dialogism. I'm going to repeat your earlier words, or I'm going to guess what you're thinking right here, and then I'm going to argue with it or shut it down or whatever I want. Sure. So, Mr. Jefferson, you have hundreds of slaves whose descendants will curse our names when we're safe in our graves. Yes, let me talk about your situation. You've got hundreds of slaves, and you know who else is going to have an opinion here? These slaves' descendants. Distinctio. Let me explain more about what this word I'm using means. I'm here to say we need freedom, but I can give a whole big lecture on what freedom really means and when will we have freedom? When will I say freedom has been achieved? That's MLK's thing. Well, we have long songs discussing all the meanings of being helpless and all the meanings of being satisfied, don't we? Enumeration, or the clunkier eutrapismus. Making a point more forcibly by giving a long list of reasons why, often numbered list of reasons, like Angelica in Satisfied. I shouldn't marry this guy for 3 exact reasons. Number 1, number 2, number 3. Okay, then. And of course, we also count those numbers a lot in 10 Dual Commandments and all the things like 10 Dual Commandments, don't we? Ethopia. Putting yourself in somebody else's character to say what they must be thinking and feeling. Angelica says that she knows her sister so well that Eliza would say, "I'm fine," and she'd be lying. Ethos at last. As we know, we were going alphabetically. Sure. You guys trust me? I behaved ethically in government. I never stole. I'm your colleague. All I did was cheat on my wife, and that doesn't work out. Evidence. Obviously, in the rap battles, we have plenty of evidence being supplied and facts and details. Exigence. Normally I'd sit and behave myself, but the situation is so dire that I really have to do something here. I have to stand up. I have to say something. I have to speak out. I have to demand we do something better. The situation with the king is so bad that we need to rise up. There are several mentions of how bad things are under the tyranny, like all the ships in New York Harbor. Expeditio. Dude. Well, there's a bunch of things we could do. We could do this, we could do this, we could do this. Oh, but those are all horrible things to do. Let's not do them. I guess the only thing left we can do is my real plan. Like Jefferson says, we can't cure prejudice or rightful desperate hate. So do we send them back to Africa, or do we give them or do they get a separate state? Well, neither of those is going to work either. So the only thing we can do is nothing, he finally decides. Flattery. Well, that one we actually do know what it means, as opposed to all this Greek and Latin. Using lots of praise to make somebody like you and agree with your opinion. Burr tries kissing up to Washington, but his, I admire how you keep firing on the British for from a distance sounds rude and snarky, and Washington doesn't seem to be in the mood to be criticized and tells Burr, "Thank you very much, but you can leave now. I want to talk to somebody else." But later, when we see him campaigning, which by the way was a big no-no, the our founding fathers actually thought people would like you so much that if you were the right person for the job, you wouldn't have to campaign. You could just show up and see who they voted for. The founding fathers, when they wrote the system, also didn't think there were going to be political parties. There were several things where they didn't really, really didn't consider enough about human nature, but so it goes sometimes. But anyway, we do see Burr charming the public. Hypothesis. An educated guess that if we do this, then this will happen. King George says the colonies are going to feel bad about what they did and they're going to come crawling back. Alrighty. And Burr, of course, has his philosophy about if you wait for it, everything is going to be fine. And Hamilton thinks that he can do his Eye of the Storm, Reynolds pamphlet, write his way out thing. And a lot of people guessed wrong. Identification. I'm part of this big group who has this big concept in mind. Hamilton feels for America as a whole and wants a stronger America, a stronger federal presence. And Jefferson feels more like a man from Virginia who should be sticking up for Virginia. And of course, our founding fathers were divided on the states' rights versus federal rights question. And likewise, the people, Lafayette and Jefferson, obviously played by the same actor, who care about France and the French Revolution. Jefferson spent many years over there as ambassador, of course. Ideology. How you see your surroundings. Hamilton sees the country as one United States that needs one financial system, whereas lots of people saw 13 separate states that needed 13 financial systems. He doesn't think it matters where the capital is, even though New York is his home state, but basically home state. But he wants a stronger federal presence wherever the capital is, whereas Jefferson wants the capital near Virginia and doesn't want Virginia paying for other people's debts. And we see this dictating so much of their action, of course. Induction. For induction, you use facts to draw conclusions. Sometimes these are right, sometimes these are wrong. You better hope your facts are good enough and things like that. These guys use financial facts to support their causes about whether they should have to pay or not. Inference. I use evidence or known stuff to come up with an opinion about what's happening. We see that in the rap battles too. In Loco Parentis, Hercules Mulligan uses this phrase. This is literally in place of parents. I'm looking after this person or arguing for this person like their guardian would do. Indignatio, to make the audience furious. Hamilton says he'll show Jefferson where my shoe fits, and the congressmen are just horrified. Keros, as we said, speaking in front of the Lincoln Memorial or something. Burr, Washington, and Hamilton are struggling with when is the right time to make my decision. When should I be standing up and speaking about what I care about? Burr, of course, keeps saying the situation, the time, the place aren't quite right to make my stand. I need to wait later. Logos. Non-stop. Hamilton says the people need the Constitution, so I'm going to write all these essays with evidence and facts supporting the Constitution. Shouldn't you join me, Burr? This is the right thing to do. But all of his details about why they need to do this don't work for Burr. Occupatio. Introducing and responding to the opponent's arguments before they bring them up. The opposite of apophasis. All right. Jefferson says, I know Alexander Hamilton doesn't want to have this debate. I said it before he did, but we're doing it anyway. Oiktos, showing pity or compassion. Oh, poor Hamilton. He's destroyed his career with the Reynolds pamphlet and he lost his son. That's all really, really awful things to happen. Yeah, that stinks. Pathos, so many emotional moments in the musical, especially the loss of his son, which is really an emotional ringer, right? But we've got other ones too. Your position or your purpose or your thesis, what you're trying to prove, what you're trying to argue. Jefferson and Hamilton, I keep mentioning those cabinet battles, absolutely have one strong point to make and they make it, whereas Burr doesn't tend to say what he wants. That's his whole point, that he likes to nod, smile, and not say this is what we should be doing. Pragmatism. We need to make some choices based on practicality, on here's what the resources we have, this is what we can afford, stuff like that. Hamilton tells Jefferson, welcome to the present, we're running a real nation. We owe people money and we have to pay it somehow. Propaganda, advertising, to help or harm something. Political propaganda is huge, of course. So Burr is going around going, I'm good for the country, and Jefferson is not good for the country. Sure. Public sphere. Well, if you're standing on a soapbox where the crowds can see you having your debate, sure, Farmer refuted. Cuestiones, I guess. Debatable points that we're debating. Okay, cabinet battles again. Rebuttal. So here's what I think about the situation. Now, would you like to disagree with that and make your points about why I'm wrong? That's a rebuttal, popular in debate. So yeah, Jefferson speaks and then Hamilton gets to rebut him, argue with him. And both times Hamilton succeeds. Scare line or scare word, something that we're using to just frighten people into doing what we want. Think of the families. It's the downfall of the American family. Yeah. Heed not the rabble who scream revolution. They're scary. They're going to get us all killed. They're just crazy people. Yeah. Tautology. And we are reaching the end at last. That was a lot of information, I know. Tautology, saying the same thing in different words. Ask him a question, it glances off, he obfuscates, he dances. Same thing 3 times. To obfuscate is just to like babble without answering the question. Validity. Is this an okay way to argue? Are you making your point in a reasonable way? And Hamilton points out that Seabury is reading a prepared speech, so no, he is not. So that's a lot of different ways to argue, according to the rhetoricians and logicians. And these are things you can, of course, look for in Hamilton. And oh my gosh, just watch a political speech or a political commercial. Look at great speeches through history, and you will see so many of these, and you could go tick them all off. Give it a try.